All right, we're live. This is episode 4 of Sagas and Sass. Right now, we were supposed to cover, this episode covers, is going to cover the entirety of Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. We were originally going to do this episode last week, but due to the election and just busyness in some of our lives, we ended up doing an episode called What Makes a Saga. So if you're following us and haven't listened to that yet, it was myself, Nick, and Jonathan, and then we had a couple guests on, Shelby and Thomas. So it was actually a really fun discussion, and I'm hoping to do a few more episodes kind of along that same vein in the future. If you're watching this as a webcast, I apologize for my shiny face and makeup. I have been Steven Universing it up today, so you're just be happy I removed the pearl from my forehead. I tried, as you probably tell, I tried to like wipe some of the makeup off, and then I just gave up halfway through, so I'm like more colorful on one side. That's how much I care about how I look right now. So anyway, so tonight we're covering all of Siege and Storm. Again, my name is Tara. I am I'm one of the hosts, but I guess I'm the person who kind of came up with the idea for this. You can find me across the web at A Geek Saga. And then you guys just want to real quick reintroduce yourselves and we'll jump right in.
Sure, I'll jump in. Nick Popio. You can find me most places at Nick Popio. That's me. Listen to other episodes if you want the spiel.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan Egan, just a genre fan for my whole life.
Hi, I'm Nami. You can find me most places at Necronami Cosplay. Theoretically, next week I will be in cosplay, so that's going to be wild.
That's super exciting.
I had more insightful things to say, but I lost them. We're doing great.
I just heard a really weird noise, and I'm just like...
No, I heard that too. It sounded like an owl. And I
don't know if that was on your end. I don't know. No, I heard it. I thought I heard it from outside my headphones, and it's storming really bad here. So I'm just like, what is going on? All right. So we'd actually had started like a document with some discussion points and everything, well over a week ago. But I'm going to go through these in the order they are listed in the document, because I kind of tried to put them in this order for a specific reason. But the first question, this is something that Jonathan presented, I believe, correct?
Yes, it is.
Wanting to know if Alina, aka Princess Buttercup, will eventually choose the Dread Pirate Roberts, or Wesley, aka Mal, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, correct. No. I'm sorry. That would be Nikolai. Dread Pirate Roberts would be Nikolai.
Dread Pirate Roberts is Nikolai. Is Wesley also Nikolai, or is Mal Nikolai?
No. So I saw it as they split the two characters of Wesley and the Dread Pirate Roberts. So you have Nikolai, the Dread Pirate Roberts, or Wesley, which would be Mal.
Okay.
Well, I know who I would choose.
And then, she's to come to the power of Prince Humperdink, aka the Darkling. Nick, I mean, honestly, you say you know who you would choose, and I'm literally up here like Nikolai. Obviously, and not because he's not because he does turn out to be a prince, but like,
I mean, that's icing on the cake, right? Like, he's also just easily the best character.
I mean, also, but like, here's my less than popular opinion. I'm gonna guess. I picked Strumhound. I picked Strumhound.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing, though. Like, I think we're kind of assuming that they're one and the same.
No, that's the thing. I don't pick Nikolai because, let's be fair, I love him as character. He's objectively my favorite character in like media stuff, but I don't pick Nikolai because he is a politician. And
you want the pirate.
Whole character as Nikolai just being like, hey, look, I'm manipulating y'all. I'm using you for this, right? But I'm jokey and funny, and we're also bros. I do have morals though, because I hesitate for 3 seconds, because I think about the fact that I don't know if I would sacrifice you for the good of my morals, but I think about it, so I am better than the Darkling, which he is, obviously, like, straight up, definitely better than the Darkling. Still a politician. So that's my thing with Nikolai. I like straight up Strumhond back before he had, to deal with all of his politics. I prefer that one mask.
Okay.
Sorry, I love me my little pirate boy.
I mean, who doesn't love pirates?
He can always dress up like a pirate for you.
Yeah, thank you. Give me Strumhond with Nikolai's face, and we set.
Well, yeah. What does Alina call him? The too clever fox when he's dressed up like
the too clever fox.
Yeah.
He's
got my God,
fake
face on.
Also, speaking of the too clever fox, have you guys read the short stories that Leigh wrote?
Which ones?
So she has a book called Language of Thorns, where she basically writes all of these short stories and folk tales that are from the world of Grishaverse. And one of the actual stories that she writes is the story that Alina references, the story of the too clever fox. And basically, the story boils down to Fox knows everybody's business and is like, "What up? I'm tricking you. I'm clever as shit. I'm gonna trick you." And then Fox gets tricked, and he's like, "Oh shit, I got tricked." And then Fox's friend is like, "It's all right, bro. You're still clever." And Fox is like, "Yeah, I guess, but like, I got tricked."
Yeah, I mean, that was Language of Thorns is one of the ones I definitely am planning on forcing you guys to read when we're done with like the main books, because we're gonna probably have to stretch the series out. I mean, we are gonna have to stretch the series out a little bit to make it last through the end of April. Or really to make it last through when the next Nikolai book comes out, because that's not coming out till March 31st.
Yeah.
So
also, like, this book super made me just want to generally actually read my copy of Lives of Saints, which is here. And for reference, Tara, it is not upside down. That is definitely
I still have mine here. The upside down version.
Mine opens the correct way.
Yeah. I actually like that it's upside down though. Like I still need to actually write a review of it, but I've been kind of like, well, we talked about it in the first episode of this podcast, so I can at least say I did something with it. But also, like, I just like the fact that it's upside down. Like, that's not something I'm allowed to say in when I'm reviewing when they send you like a pre what do they call it? There's a name for it. An ARC, an ARC, advanced reader's copy. You're not supposed to talk about grammar grammar things, spelling things, like, because those things will presumably, not like really ever, but presumably be fixed. But yeah, the fact that it's completely upside down is kind of, that's a printing error. That's a full-on printing error. I like it though. I like it. This is my special copy. Nobody talks shit about my special copy.
Yeah. But honestly, I will say the thing that I like so much about the book is that it looks how it's described to look in the actual series. Mm-hmm. So Alina describes the apparat giving her the book, and she's like, yeah, the red leather cover with the golden lettering that like she hadn't seen since she was a child. And I'm just like, I have it. Sorry for that cursed noise.
so Alina, Nami would choose Sturmhund. I would choose Nikolai as a whole. Nick would also apparently choose Nikolai as a whole. Somehow that doesn't surprise me that we're on the same page here. Jonathan, what would you do, though?
I also would pick Nikolai, but I suspect that it's going to be Mal at the end. Not knowing anything.
No.
Don't boo Mal. I love Mal.
I just suspect that that's how this is going to end.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
I personally...
Maybe he gets better in the third book. I don't know.
I wouldn't choose Mal because Mal is a literal child. He's 17 years old. He baby. So I wouldn't choose Mal because he's baby. And I wish to adopt him and protect him from the haters. But like, let's be fair. Nikolai dumbass. Like, I love Nikolai, but like full on, like, you do have to admit that like when you like straight up think of his treatment of Alina and Mal, he's like not great. He's too busy politician.
No, he's not. And maybe this is like a remnant of like.
Too.
Yeah, but and to be honest, maybe this is a remnant of like my past relationships. But I've absolutely dated, and one of them was not that long ago. Dudes who were like politicians in life, and I was literally just this is a pretty thing that I can present to people. She's smart. She makes me look good. Like, you don't actually love the person for who they are. You just want to be like, look at this thing that I can show everybody. Like, I have been that thing to dudes more than once in my adult life.
I am so like,
so it could be a remnant of like, just, I'm just used to being.
Yeah. Let me put it this way. Remove the politician from Nikolai, and I adore him. I adore his character for what he's presented as. I especially love him because literally his whole character is like, and I'm not sure if everybody else read this the same way, but he's like kid with ADHD just trying to make do. Like, everything that they like describe about him, like him sort of like never being able to sit still, always needing to do something, never being a master of anything, but sort of learning and doing everything, becoming fully absorbed in certain tasks, where he's hanging out with a material key and he's making this stuff instead of just like, suggesting these ideas. Like, his level of involvement in every single thing he does, like his hyperfixations, stuff like that. Like, it really hit me like, this kid has ADHD. And I keep saying kid, but like, what? He's like 20, 21, somewhere around there.
He's not much younger than you, Nami.
Yeah, no, he's not a kid. I think he's my little sister's age, which makes me once again scream kid. But, he's like solidly like, ADHD, like, to a T. But I think, the words that Alina says to him when she's like, you wear these masks, like, so easily, and I don't know who the real you is. It's creepy. And he's, like, offended and hurt. Like, I like that Nikolai that, like, shows his feelings, but that Nikolai appears so rarely because he's so busy doing what he needs to do that I can't consider him as a person that I would choose romantically, because he's so busy putting on these masks. And until you can know who a person truly is, you can't pick them. Because,
that's a good point.
That's just like me. I'm like definitely overanalyzing this.
But was it ADHD, or was he just an intellectually curious person who, in a role that's not perceived to be someone who?
I think it's ADHD.
In a life that isn't, well, let me finish, please.
Okay, sorry.
In a role that the perception is you don't have to be intellectually curious. You're the prince. You're supposed to do these things. You're supposed to look good at court. We have experts who do this. It's not your thing to learn. So I just thought it was,
So
his parents were not exactly intellectual geniuses. His brother wasn't interested, and I thought he was. That's how I interpret it.
Well, I definitely do see that, but I also interpret characters like Paja as more just straight up intellectually curious versus Nikolai. Like, to be intellectually curious, you don't also typically have that jumping between everything sort of energy. And the thing that I specifically reference to when I'm talking about the ADHD is when he talks about when he was a kid, he couldn't sit still. And tutors never knew what to do with him.
Yeah.
And that sort of stuff. And then specifically later, he says a line later about not being a master of anything. And
he does jump from thing to thing, which, trust me, as somebody,
and that really struck me as like ADHD traits. And, speaking of other intellectuals in the story, it's interesting because you don't really have any straight up intellectuals. You have like neurodivergent intellectuals, like take David. He is obviously definitely somewhere on the spectrum, and I love him to pieces. But like, you don't really see a straight up, like, full on intellectual person. And I'm just like, give me that too. I like to imagine that the other fabricator, the other material key that like Alina pulls on her like little council is, that she's just intellectual. But it's weird to imagine that all the material key are nerds. But I do quietly. Let's be real. I would be a material key. Absolutely. Without fail.
Yeah, you would. You would.
In a corner with David.
So okay, so I mean, well, now we all know what we would choose. I mean, like, and like Jonathan said, I think like, you don't know who she's going to end up with, but let's be real, this is a YA series. Like, you also kind of deep down know who she's going to end up with.
I mean, I know this isn't my first read, but I will say that when I was first reading this, I did suspect Mal, because every single book starts and ends with the boy and the girl. And it just seemed very poetic to have it with the boy.
Not the Hunger Games.
But no, she's talking about every single book in this series. But I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who hasn't read past this. So like, we'll stop right there and say like I will just say that there are definitely some big ass plot twists that happen after this book. In and after this book. So
I know that John and Nick have been reading ahead, but at your ending in Siege and Storm, like where you ended after book 2, who did you think she was going to end up with?
After book 2, Nikolai?
All right.
All right.
But long term, it just seems wrong. Like that's not going to happen in my mind.
All right. What about you, Nick? What'd you think?
Honestly, I was not focused on that aspect at the end of book 2.
Bit worried about other problems.
Yeah, there were some other things on my head, on my brain, that I was like, how are we going to get out of this situation?
Like the good old traumatized yourself until your hair went white situation.
Yeah.
Valid. Yeah.
Valid. All right, so moving on to the next question, and this is again kind of going back to Alina's like relationship things, and I know Nami has a lot of thoughts on this. I have been reading through each of these books, at least the copies that I have, has a Q&A at the end. I've kind of reserved some things some questions that have been asked for after the third book, and this one was one that was very specifically from Siege and Storm, I believe, where one of the editors, I think, was asking the author, like, do you think that the Darkling and Mal bring out each of them brings out the best and the worst in like different parts of Alina, and Leigh actually agreed that like they each bring out different good and bad parts of her, and I'm wondering if you guys think that's the case. I mean, obviously the author said that yes, it is. So in a way, I understand where Leigh Bardugo is coming from, but at the same time, like I don't know when these questions were asked of her. You know what I mean? Like, because the books I had from 3-4 years ago when I first read them, my cousin borrowed them and never returned them. So like these are new copies. So like I don't know if my non-Netflix stamped books had these interviews at the end of them, and whether the author really thought, because I get where she's coming from, but
okay, so here is where I stand with it. I think it is incredibly unfair to measure these two characters in relation to Alina by that same standard, because first of all, of any relationship ever, when you interact with a person, that person brings out different aspects of your personality, good or bad, period, space, and that's it. That's like, duh. That's how human interaction works with other people, and that's what being a person is. However, I think framing it like, do the Darkling and Mal both bring out different good and bad aspects of Alina is a bit of a weird way to ask that question, because of course they do, but you're sort of framing it that like Mal brings out equally bad characteristics in her that the Darkling does, where like, no, the Darkling brings out fear and like repression and like slavery and like literal worry for her existence, where Mal brings out self-doubt over her powers. And granted, that's also not good. That's decidedly bad because her powers are part of her, but it's not literal worry about her existence and the fear that she's going to end up as a pawn and in slavery and enslaved to evil and be part of the subjugation of a world and murder billions of people. Like it's a false equivalence. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, obviously Mal doesn't bring out good things in her all the time. Like, Mal's not perfect. Not only is he not perfect, he is a teenager, and teenagers are notoriously idiotic when it comes to relationships, and they are also teenagers in the middle of a war. Like, obviously, like, he's going to bring out bad things in her, but the bad things he brings out in her, jealousy. The bad things the Darkling brings out in her, murder.
Yeah,
it's not the same scale.
Yeah, I'm just like,
and one has led to the other.
Like I get that, like the Darkling does bring out like she has like empathy for him. I believe I don't want to say it's straight up sympathy. I think it's empathy because she understands in a way, not totally obviously because she hasn't lived forever and everything, but like she understands in a way like what he's dealing with and going through. But all that said, like, I feel like to say that he brings out good in her is highly suspect because a lot of the things that he brings out in her are just signs of an abusive relationship. Like, of course, when you care about a person, you can always see that there's some sort of like forgivable thing in them. There's some sort of good in them, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I think to say that he brings out good in her, like him alone, because she's clearly like a sympathetic / empathetic person anyway. Like, she feels for other people constantly.
The one thing I will say is that the only thing that he sort of brings out that is good in her is her, like, acceptance of her abilities, whereas Mal is scared of them. And, that's the only thing that I would say objectively that the Darkling does that is good. But even when he's doing that, which is good, he's literally doing it to turn her against Mal and to turn her against her current allies by telling her that they're just going to fear her for her abilities, and he's the only one that will love her for her abilities. So, like, it's difficult for me to even say that he brings out anything good in her, because anything good he tries to bring out in her or that he presents to her, he's only presenting to her as a further way to manipulate her. So, like, I can't consciously call it good, because what he's doing is manipulating, and just because you're saying something good to a person to manipulate them doesn't mean it's not manipulation. Like full on, he's like, hey, your friend's gonna hate you because you're powerful. You should love your powers. I'll love your powers.
Well, it wasn't just loving her powers. I thought the Darkling brought out her confidence more. I mean, she wasn't very confident in herself prior at the beginning of the story. She's become more confident. She's still uncertain, but at least she seems more self-assured than she was at the beginning of the story.
I don't know. She's always like read to me as full of doubt, and like just low-key everything she does, she's just like, I don't know what I'm doing. And that really hasn't, in my mind overall, hasn't changed from book one. Just because, like, she's doing things more decisively. But just because you're doing them decisively doesn't mean you're like more certain. And like in her head, she's literally just constantly screaming, "What am I doing?" Just that noise. I'm so sorry also for all the bad noises that I'm making, because I'm sure that somebody's just like, also you three are just like happily listening, and then suddenly I make a screeching noise and you're just like, well, plug my ears. Nice.
So
we appreciate your mouth noises.
Yeah. So we're all in agreement at the very least that the idea that the Darkling brings, because I do agree that Mal brings out good, like bad things in her. But like, are we all in agreement that like there's some things that you could kind of tag as like, oh yeah, like the Darkling brings out this good thing in her, but it's not. It's still kind of, it's all just kind of poisoned, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't count as good unless it's like truly good. And with the Darkling, everything is just undercut by that, like, hey, taking over the world, killing all these people, manipulating you to do it. That was a great song. Love that.
That was a good song.
Thank you.
We need to record that track.
I should become a pop singer.
Yeah. We all agree.
You're already YouTube famous. So.
God. YouTube did not need that. Sorry, YouTube.
I mean, if you count the musical getting what I don't know, a couple 100,000 views, YouTube famous.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Stab.
that's what Nami's famous for. She's stabbing the air in the wrong direction in this Hamilton Game of Thrones mashup. All right, so Jonathan, did you have any other thoughts on this before we move on to your next question?
No, my total silliness of a next question, but sure.
Because honestly, like I totally forgot. Like last week, I had this whole plan to look this up, and then I was like, oh well, I have a whole other week to look this up. But there's been a lot going on in the world in the past week, in case we're all not aware.
And you didn't ask Dean.
I feel like I started to, and then there's to be honest, there's been a lot going on with him too. So, which is not for public consumption. Good, like the good stuff, but also like you're going to have to explain the need to compare and contrast the decisions and motivations that led to Vasili's betrayal of his family. And now let's be real. I don't think Vasily did this on purpose. I think he's just
that becomes the question,
right?
Did he do it on purpose, or was he just a total schmo?
I think it was partly he was trying to show up Nikolai because Nikolai was clearly jealous of Nikolai and how smart he was and well liked he was and stuff like that, and he felt like he was being kind of shunted to the side. But I'm still the prince, like I'm still the person who's going to inherit this throne. I need to go do something. Like some of it was definitely like a power struggle between it definitely became a thing because of the power struggle between the two of them. But I really, I don't think Vasily, there was never any malice on his part in terms of like actually betraying them to the Darkling. He was just that stupid. So like, but I'm curious because you specifically wanted to compare it to Baltar in the original 78 Battlestar Galactica, which I just like, I'm sorry, I watched like 3 episodes of that show and gave up.
So going back to your first point about whether he was stupid or not versus whether he actually was a little bit more sophisticated and he had hoped that by being involved in this betrayal, he would inherit the throne. Maybe under the Darkling's purview, but he'd be on the throne and get all, faster and not have to risk losing it to Nikolai. Versus in the original Battlestar Galactica, Count Baltar was this senator who decided to betray the human race to the Cylons because he thought once the Cylons conquered, he would be in charge. So, but the setup was so similar in that they're at a celebration of this peace treaty versus the celebration of this other peace treaty when it is realized that everything is totally vulnerable now, and at the last minute, they realize it, but it's too late, and they're being annihilated. So that as I read through that, I'm like, oh my god, this is right out of Battlestar Galactica 1978, the opening sequence, basically, of the show. And then a little bit later on, Baltar, you learn a little bit more about Baltar as he is basically spared from death by the Cylons if he will eventually kill the last humans and capture them. But so he's attempting to capture them or kill them all. But whether his motivations are quite there to actually succeed, because it's going to be killed as soon as he kills the humans. Was always something I always went back and forth on. But I just saw this similarity, and it's like, oh my god, did Leigh Bardugo watch this and just get influenced by this slightly, just like she may have been influenced by this Princess Bride? Because we all read so many things in our lifetimes, and then you get influenced by other things you've written or watched, even if it's subconscious. So it was just
I think
a silly thing.
I think it's silly, but it's valid. So I think it's definitely possible that she got influenced by that scene. But I also think it's very obvious. Tara, am I allowed to just like drop a gigantic curse here? Am I allowed to do that? Are we PG?
Yes. No, I have not rated us, but cursing is not really. I think the only things that are considered like you have to like rate yourselves as if you're like talking about like
doing naughty stuff.
Yeah.
But oh man, I ruined it. We're explicit now. Okay.
We talked about butts, you guys.
All right. Well, I'm just gonna say it then. I think Vasily's just a fucking idiot. Like full on. Like I give him credit in the fact that instead of just moping, he did something, because I will say I never expected him to try to make any political move in this book. I truly expected him to roll over and let Nikolai win, or whine and throw a hissy fit until he won. I didn't expect him to try to make an alliance or do anything on the scale to try to win. I think, of fucking course, he ruined it. You fucking idiot. And I think Nikolai standing up and being like, are you serious, was the perfect time to drop an F-bomb in the book. Like, come on, Leigh, you could have done it. We would have all understood. I know it's young adult, but all young adults curse. It's fine. But yeah, honestly, I think that he had no malice in it, because let's be fair, if he had malice in it, he would have been more careful about making sure he survived versus literally 3 seconds in.
I think there was malice in it, but his malicious intent was only toward Nikolai.
Yeah, his maliciousness was towards like, I'm not going to let my little brother assert me. I'm just as good as you, versus like a fuck the human race. The Darkling's going to murder us all.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And I did really like the scene where he, the whole thing where he died. It's like, clearly Nikolai is his mom's favorite. Yeah. But she was also very, very obviously upset about like what happened to Vasily, like, or however the hell you're supposed to. I've been always saying Vasily, but I don't think it matters. Like what happened to him, like she was also clearly upset about it. So like Nikolai was like her favorite, but like her favorite in like, I don't know, he's the youngest. I think it was more like, I don't think she ever really was like in love with his dad or anything like that. Cause like, by the way, like we all know for like, it's never been proven, but we know like, or at least, it hadn't been proven, but like we know for a fact he's like a bastard. Like he didn't look anything like anybody in his family. Like
that boy's a bastard.
It's like Robert Baratheon all over again, where like he doesn't have the wet lips and the weak chin.
Yeah,
but
he's handsome, you know?
But is he the Darkling's child? That's the question.
Ew, no.
Oh no,
that's not even on the page. But speaking of looks, can I take a bit of a detour now? Because I wanted to address what to me was the most like weirdest dichotomy in the book that I didn't notice the first time around, but it definitely struck out to me hardcore this time.
Sure.
So I wanted to talk about like the fixation on like the not pretty men, and just like, so okay, I'm going to start this by saying I love Genya to pieces. Genya is the best. And you will continue to love her in book 3. And like, oh my God, everything that happens to her, I am so team Alina of not forgiving her, but I'm also so team of Genya didn't deserve this, because Genya didn't deserve this. And she's also, on the long list of people that the Darkling super manipulated. And she also has her own short story where you see the kindness that the Darkling extends to her. And that short story is really good. It's called The Tailor, and
it's at the end of this book.
It's at the end of this book? Is it?
I think, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember when it was published, but that sounds correct. But
in my copy, it's at the end of this book.
It takes place between book 1 and book 2, so it's basically Genya's POV for the first book and talking about like how she like betrays Alina and like why she does all of that, and like basically the whole thing is like the Darkling is so kind to her, and that's why she stays loyal to him. And I think people, like a lot of people pointed to that and they were like, wow, look, the Darkling's capable of kindness. And I'm like, you fucking idiots. Like, you can manipulate so much more easier with kindness. This is just him manipulating her to a T. And it's also much more evidence that you can manipulate easier with kindness, because the moment he unleashes his anger on her with, you know, what happens to her at the end of this book, and then Nicheovia that he like just lets attack her, like she comes back. Like she comes to Alina, and it makes sense because he's no longer like that kind, safe figure to her. But that's not actually what I wanted to address. I wanted to address the book's fixation on how creepy and terrible the king is. Because first of all, yes, the king is creepy and terrible, but they also seem to fixate on the reason that he's creepy and terrible is because he's ugly. Like, versus he's a 40-year-old man preying on prettier and younger
I would say older than that, but
in the first book, it specifically describes him as being about 40 looking. And I'm going to pause you for a second because I want to finish this thought. And the reason I want to finish this thought is because it's very important. Because the king who is 40 is always portrayed as creepy for preying on Genya and on servant girls, and it seems but the Darkling is never portrayed that same way for preying on Alina when he's 120 years old.
But that's because he looks 20.
And the only difference is because the Darkling looks young and is hot, and the king isn't cute. The king is ugly. And that's literally, I find it mind-bogglingly absurd that continues so much in the book, because literally the whole time she's like, the king's so creepy and I hate him, what he did to Genya, what he did to the girls. And I'm like, sweetie, can't you see that that's what the Darkling's doing to you, and that's what he did to Zoya? And like, Genya said she'd willingly like fuck him if the opportunity came, but like, don't you see how this is terrible, because the man is 120 years old?
Yeah, I mean, I
just
fair.
Well, I get where you're coming from, but well, yeah. Also, I was gonna say, like, it's also like a position of power thing with the king.
The Darkling holds the same, if not greater, power over the Grisha, and he takes that same advantage over the Grisha girls, because it's heavily implied that he groomed Zoya before this.
Yeah.
And it's heavily implied that his kindness towards people like this isn't the first time it's happened, and like obviously he clearly is like very ready to sleep with Alina like the night after the ball, like.
Yeah. No matter how you slice it, it's Bill Clinton with Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah, it's Bill Clinton, and we have ugly Bill Clinton and cute Bill Clinton. And ugly Bill Clinton doesn't get the pass, but cute Bill Clinton gets the pass. And I'm like, I don't know. They both fucked Monica Lewinsky. Like, maybe we should worry about Monica?
I mean...
Also, I follow her on Twitter, and gem.
Legit treasure.
A treasure.
Yeah.
You follow Monica Lewinsky on Twitter? Is that what you just said?
I follow Monica.
Yeah, she's big on Twitter.
She's amazing on Twitter.
Wonderful. Who, you know, does a lot of like advocating for like women in workplaces and like sexual abuse and stuff like that, and like, you know, making the world safe for women and speaking out about, you know, sexual situations and getting into situations that you shouldn't, but you're young and the other person had a lot more responsibility in, and all of that sort of thing. Also, she's just generally hilarious and literally sits down and she's like, hey guys, I fucked up. How you doing? And I'm like, oh, what a good beat. She's doing great and I'm so happy for her. That's my mom. Didn't think I'd go there.
So we've gone into Vasily's betrayal, and that led into this. But you know, before we get into like quotes and passages that I want to highlight, how about Alina trying to sacrifice herself? I honestly like
Classic.
I was super punchy when I wrote this, like when I started this document. So my actual comment was, how about Alina trying to sacrifice herself like that? Wowzers. I just thought I was very punchy when I wrote that, but like I jet lagged and exhausted and punchy. But I mean, you know, I feel like she's like constantly like, I'm not a saint, but she just really, really, really wants to be a martyr.
She really does.
Like, yeah, there's somebody who's like so convinced she's not a martyr. She's like, let's just do it. Throw ourselves into the pit.
Let's do this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she wants to.
Well,
and I get that she's trying to stop the Darkling, but also it just seems a little bit excessive.
Mm-hmm.
Any case, she's not like great at critical thinking outside of her space, and honestly, her space is pretty much covered in shadow monsters.
I mean, I don't know. I give her the benefit of the doubt that it wasn't so much martyrdom as I need to do what I can to stop him, and if it kills me, so be it. At that point in time where they're being totally overrun, and it's likely they're all going to die anyway. So I'm not so sure there's this. She thought about the martyrdom aspect of it, in that I want to be a martyr or I need to be a martyr, rather than this is a desperate time and this is the only thing I can think of real fast, and it might work and I might die, but I'm going to die anyway, so what the hell.
Yeah. I don't necessarily disagree with you. I just also am kind of done with that whole trope, especially when it comes to heroines in YA novels.
I'm also very sad about that trope when it comes to teenage heroes in YA novels. Yeah. Like, this whole time she's literally 17 years old. Like, a child should not have to sacrifice herself to save the world. And granted, the way that the book presents children, it sounds like children are like people younger than 15, because that's what the Grisha are. Like, that's what the Grisha children are. Yeah. And I did that math specifically using the character that shows up in Six of Crows, who claimed to be one of the Grisha children during this arc. But like at the same time, I'm like, she baby, don't let baby do this. Keep baby safe. Why baby in war?
Yeah, not that children haven't been forced to fight wars, and even recently in Africa and things like that, but it definitely seems like, at least in fiction, it happens far more often in young adult books than it does in any other books.
Well, I get the wanting a relatable hero or heroine thing, but the thing I dislike the most about it is the fact that it's normalized in these books. Like, it's not like, oh, she's young and she's doing it and this is weird and exceptional and shouldn't happen. It's like, oh, she's young and she's doing this, but she was already in the army, because that's what people do at this age, and that's normal. And I find that just generally like weird and not great, because it's all well and good that there's like the Grisha children and they're just hanging out and being safe, but the Grisha children should be everybody under 18, because they're all the children. And like her screaming at Vasily, like in that one scene about like, you know, reducing the draft age, like obviously, yeah, like don't reduce the draft age. That's absurd. But y'all are already drafting children, and the fact that you're like showing that in a book and making it sound normal is still not good. And I understand that this is supposed to be a war-torn country and they're really broken, but like,
But I mean, people, you know, assuming this is the Middle Ages or near Middle Age, or slightly later.
I think it's supposed to be like
1700s.
No, I think it's later than that. I think it's like late 1800s, early 1900s. Like I think like end of Tsarist Russia type of. But
they don't have steam engines.
And
they don't, but like I feel like there's the absence of some technology, but I don't know. Like I also feel like with Vasily dying, with what happens at the end of this book, where like, you know, all the good guys are on the run and somebody else is taking over the throne. You know, I feel like I think it's kind of a mix. Like they don't have the technology of that era, but I think that's kind of the era we're meant to believe it is.
Yeah. But also, like, keep in mind, this isn't me, like, saying anything, commenting on, like, the era or, like, you know, this was historically a thing or, like, child soldiers still exist today. I just, like, you know, I wanted to bring up the point that this trope appears way too often of normalizing children taking part in, you know, life-changing things and dangerous scenarios in YA books. And I think that's just so damaging, and that they should, you know, I'm all for YA books with a, you know, a teenage like protagonist, because obviously that's what needs to be done. But it should also be, you know, this is weird and different, and kids shouldn't have to save the world. You know, just like generally, because kids are literally, you know, Gen whatever we're on now, the babies are literally standing up and saving our environment now, and like they shouldn't have to do that. And even though that's real life, it's messed up, you know. And it's like, you know, this is just me being an idealist and being like, problematic tropes, fix that, please.
Yeah, I think the young adult saving the world. I'm trying to go back to what was the first young adult book where the kid saved the world, and I sort of think Ender's Game, but that wasn't even written. It wasn't written as a young adult book, so originally they just started marketing it that years later they started marketing it as young adult.
And I think that's kind of the point, is that the idea of like young adult fiction didn't necessarily come about that long ago, but that doesn't mean that that's like you said, the idea of a young adult or a bunch of young adults saving the world, that existed like long before.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to be real, like Frodo was a young adult in Hobbit years.
In Hobbit years, he's a baby. But yeah, like my whole thing is that like I dislike the fact that like she starts off and she's already a soldier. I'm I'm full on for like the book happening exactly as it did, except she's still at the orphanage or something as she discovers her powers, because she's a kid and she shouldn't be a soldier yet. Still on for all of this story happening, but like all the Grisha children are actually in school like kids.
Well, to be fair, she's a map maker. It's Mal. Mal's a tracker. Like they're soldiers in that they're in the army, but they're sort of like
they gave a baby a rifle. Mal is running around with a gun, and I'm like, you don't even know if you're done puberty yet. Like put that gun down. Go talk to girls. Why don't do both?
But yeah, I mean I mean it's like I get that desperation of like trying to, like, this is the last thing I can think of to do, so I'm gonna kill myself to save this guy, and it's like, or to I'm gonna kill myself to save everybody else and kill this guy. But it's I mean, obviously it didn't happen, but it's very, just to be honest, like it's a little bit self-serving, because she didn't actually know that she'd be able to kill him. So she was going to sacrifice herself, knowing she might be the only person who can stop him, without knowing for sure that she could actually kill him. I don't know.
It was definitely a last ditch move. And also I think from her point of view, she couldn't see a different movement, a different
out.
Yeah, different out. She couldn't see another way where she could fight him in an effective way and win. So this was her, oh, this can do it type of last ditch. And it just so happened that dying was the side effect. But she's like, you know what? This can do it. I have to do it.
I agree with Nami on that.
Dying was a side effect.
A side effect.
Oh my god. Let's make pins with Alina's face on it, like with the white
dying
was a side effect.
Actually, that tracks. That tracks hardcore. I wish I had like a pin press or something to make that.
God. All right.
Dying is the side effect. We're doing it. Okay, so moving on to some quotes and passages that I wanted to talk about. And we don't have to necessarily cover all of these, but when she's talking about Genya, you know, saying like, when she sees Genya, obviously with the Darkling, and saying she spent all those hours like talking and laughing with Genya, drinking tea, trying on dresses. She was lying to her the whole time. And she points out the worst part is that the Darkling had been right. If she kept clinging to Mal in the memory of the love she had for him, she wouldn't have ever mastered her power. But Genya didn't know that. She just followed orders and like watched her quote unquote friend's heartbreak. And she says, I don't know what that was, but it wasn't friendship. And that was like really like, I don't know, that's a little bit heartbreaking. Like poor Alina, because she hadn't really had any friends other than Mal. You know what I mean? And then the girls who used her to try to get close to Mal, and like she had that one kid who was like sort of her bud when she was a map maker who died like immediately. I can't even remember his name. Alexi. Okay. But like she'd never really had anyone, and she really thought Genya was like her friend, and then it turned out Genya kind of like really screwed her over. And that's like, I mean, the fact that she then doesn't let that define her is really, it's really good. You know what I mean? Like it shows her, there's a lot of things I don't like about Alina, but I think it shows her strength of character, that she doesn't, like, she's mad about it, but she doesn't let it define her or how she treats Genya at any point, really.
But what options does Genya have? I mean, her options clearly aren't good.
Just because you have limited options does not excuse your behavior.
Yes.
Well, that's true.
So let me go off for a second.
Unless the gun is at your head, right? I mean,
but
even then, you still have options. So here's the thing
that becomes really obvious in the trailer is that the gun wasn't at her head. The Darkling tells her, if you don't want to do this, you can go and I will keep you safe.
Also, I just want to talk for a second, and this is like kind of a weird connection that I'm kind of making in the moment now. I've been watching documentaries on this cult, Nexium. Big true crime fan. Anyway, so there's this cult, Nexium. It's a sex cult. Allison Mack was implicated in it, who was on Smallville.
Yeah, I know about this.
Yeah. So the head of this cult is basically influencing the next line down of cultists, who are all women, to recruit and basically bring in women who will then ultimately give sexual content and often sexual interaction to this guy who's the head of the cult, right? And so ultimately they get taken down, and many of the people are implicated in all of this, right? Not just the head guy, people who were reporting to him. Now, through the course of the documentaries, you start to understand the amount of manipulation, the amount of like risk that all of these people were in. They had to give up collateral to even be members of these groups, and so they were at risk of exposure. And you can absolutely make convincing arguments like they were coerced. All these things were happening, but at the end of the day, they were making decisions that then directly endangered other people. And yes, they had limited options. Yes, you can make arguments saying like they're not as culpable as the person who was pulling all the strings, right? Like Genya's not as culpable as the Darkling is, but that doesn't mean that she is excused from her actions just because she was following orders or just because she had limited options. At the end of the day, she still did things that are inexcusable, regardless of the motivations behind them. And I think, to me, as a person who has experienced a lot of coercion and manipulation in my life, that has deeply hurt me and impacted me, I can many times understand why somebody did something that did that to me. And I can, even to an extent, forgive them some of those things because they weren't necessarily trying to deliberately then pass them on to me. But that doesn't change what happened to me. And that doesn't change my perception of the things that occurred. And so to an extent, I can say, okay, Genya, she has her reasons for doing things, although, and I haven't read the short story, so I didn't know those things about the relationship with the Darkling. But I also still feel like people have to be held accountable for their actions, and it is up to the person who experienced the negative side effects how they want to deal with that. Because you can forgive somebody, that doesn't mean you have to have them be a part of your life anymore.
Yes.
You can say, I understand why you did that, but still fuck you.
Yeah. And I think, so one thing that I do, or I want to sort of explicitly say the extent of what happened in the trailer. So basically what you see is that this whole time, the way the Darkling is manipulating Genya is by providing her comfort, providing her a home, providing her that shoulder to cry on. He is truly manipulating her through kindness, and he is taking advantage of her kindness and her desire to help him. And the whole time he's telling her, he's like, oh, if you can't do this, it's really okay. But it's one of those things that he's framed it in a way that it doesn't really feel like it's an option, even though it is. And it's some solid mindfuckery there, but it doesn't excuse what her choices. And I think that's one of the reasons I love Genya so much as a character, because it's obvious that she's fucked up, and she literally is wearing it on her face at the end of this book. It's not very often that you get such an explicit physical mark of you're fucking up like that. Wow, I'm sorry. I just dropped the F-bomb 17 times in the last 20 minutes.
It's fine. I've done it, but trust me, I did it last week. I've done it before. We all do it.
Yeah.
Fine. But so I really...
How fucking dare you?
Oh, wait. No, I really adore Genya's character because of that. And obviously, I haven't started my reread of book 3 yet, but I genuinely can't remember if she tries to make excuses for herself or if she just apologizes. Because, the one thing that I will say is you're right. She did have the choice to step away from this, even though it would have been damaging to her. And she literally eventually does. And I think that's why we're able to forgive her more, in a sense, because it's not often that somebody betrays a person and then in the process of making it right is marked in such an obvious way of
well, and let's be real too, she does absolutely let Alina escape
exactly
in these books. So she that's how she gets those scars that we read about at the end of the book. So she
very
does
picks.
She definitely has I don't even know if I want to call it a redemption arc, because I feel like what she did was also born from the way she was manipulated by the Darkling and everything. But at the same time, she does have that redemption arc where she's she lets Alina escape and she's punished for it. She clearly feels bad about what she did. And also but also again, this is very much, you got to be so careful with this, because then you could say the SS was manipulated by Hitler and shit. So
no, I think it's one of those if you're manipulated into making bad decisions, you still make those bad decisions. You're not excused for that. But I think Genya also does definitely put her foot down and pick the right option in the end. And she physically pays for it. She pays for it in a very visible way. And in a very visible way shows her, redemption for it. Obviously, Alina's decision to forgive her actions around that, doesn't matter. And Alina's still entitled to feel betrayed by Genya, because absolutely, your one friend betrayed you, that bites. But I will also say that Alina specifically mentions in book 1 that she never really talks to Genya about Mal. she never like expresses to Genya like how important Mal is for her. And she specifically talks about this when Genya is talking about David and like her feelings for David, and they're giggling about it. And she thinks, she's like, oh, I should tell her about Mal, but I can't. And I think, you know, obviously this isn't to forgive Genya or to give her an excuse, but I think once again, like it's possible that she didn't realize like the depth of feeling that Alina had for Mal and like that depth of attachment. And perhaps if she had known that, she would have made a different decision. But for all she knew, they were BFFs and not like, you know, long lost loves. Again, she was still wrong. She still betrayed her friend. But I think it's worth mentioning that Alina didn't speak to Genya about Mal, but was her friend in every other aspect. Again, this is not me erasing her fuck-ups. Genya definitely fucked up. Definitely betrayed Alina. Also, like, just God, Alina gets betrayed by so many people, and I just want to give her a hug and keep her safe. There's what? There's Genya, there's Strumhond on some level, there's the twins, there's Mal kissing Zoya, there's, you know, the fucking Darkling.
Yeah.
Just all of love.
I mean, that kind of leads into the next thing. The next quote I had was Alina is, you know, thinking about the Darkling, and she says, like, I knew he was a practiced liar. He could fake any emotion, play on any human failing, but I couldn't deny what I felt in Novi Zem or the truth of what the Darkling had shown me. My own sadness, my own longing reflected back to me in his bleak gray eyes. Yeah.
Darkling.
Yeah, it's pukey, but it's also like, so this is one of those points in these books where I was just like remembering like being in like this abusive relationship where this person was like very clearly like playing on my emotions and what I wanted out of life. You know, because I had a lot of trouble being like accepted or understood by the people who were supposed to be closest to me, and therefore felt like separate, you know, from the people who were supposed to care about me the most. And that's like I would never want to ask Leigh Bardugo like why she writes like this, because I feel like that's a deeply personal thing, but only somebody who has understood. I feel like only somebody who has understood that level of like, it's not just them being bad and manipulating you. It's also you wanting to be understood and to be wanted, and to have this person tell you you are accepted for exactly what you are, and like you're amazing, but like the things they think that are amazing about you are actually like sort of I don't know, like weird, like not things that like I don't know. It's really hard to explain, especially for me, like because I'm God, I don't know, almost 6 years removed from it now. So it's more difficult to remember now than it was when I first read these books. But that idea of like looking into somebody's eyes and feeling like they understand you. And you, it like deep down, you know, it's like, I am not a shitty person. Like this person turns out to be such a shitty person and I am not like that. But like you still, and maybe that is part of the manipulation on their part is that they know what to say. They know the expressions to make. And I think that's part of the Darkling too. It's like, I think sometimes he does show, like the human side of himself, but most of the time I think it like, and Alina comes to this conclusion, really in the first book that he is manipulating her through words, expressions, touches, etc. Like, I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling, but
no, you are. But it's
hard to make a point. It's hard to make a point of this without saying more than I really want to.
No, you rambled, but it made a lot of sense to me. Like, in some way, I'm really grateful that when I read these books, when she had thoughts like these, that they were immediately obviously wrong to me. I'm really grateful that when I read this, that like my immediate reaction to that passage is vomit in my mouth. Obviously, no. Like, and I'm so happy that that's my reaction, because like listening to you like makes me realize how real this can be for people, and like how this is like really what it is like in the middle of these abusive relationships. And I think, you know, like you say, like this isn't something that I would have been able to write. Like, thankfully, I haven't experienced something like this, and I wouldn't have this perspective. And I think it's really interesting to have this discussion about it, because up until now, I've just been like, the Darkling is obviously bad. What's wrong with people? But the fact that like you can like see this and like understand like these dynamics of an abusive relationship, like it makes like so much more sense to me, like why people get taken in by him, and like why like she's
well, and I think like I still know he's bad, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
For sure. but like I'm saying this as somebody who is looking back, having experienced it and been like, whoa, yeah, no, he's like obviously bad, because like this is exactly what I like dealt with, but I didn't realize it until after the fact with myself. Maybe that makes me an idiot. I don't know. Like,
no,
it
got out.
You know, it makes me a person who, you know, unfortunately, like I said, was looking for. And it's weird because like at that time in my life, like I wasn't young, you know, I was in my early 30s. I had a lot of great things going for me. Like I already had a really great group of friends, including, you know, friends from like Ice and FireCon and everything. But when it came to relationships, I was kind of on the, you know, I was looking for something, and unfortunately, you know, there's just times where I don't know, the wrong person comes into your life at the right time, you know, like.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you were saying made me think of something, which is that I think people who, well, let's use the Darkling as an example. One of the things that he is, I think, really good at is putting Alina up to like a funhouse mirror and complimenting her on the reflection. And there are things in the funhouse mirror that, you know, sometimes funhouse mirrors make you look all like skinny or whatever, you know, but like, yeah, there are things that Alina sees there that resonate for her as, oh, maybe I want to be like this, or maybe this is some aspect of me that is, at least I perceive to be important. And I think one of the things that abusers do really well is finding those things and really coaxing them out of you, and then making you believe that that is something that is important and intrinsic to you, even if it's all a distortion, right? It's all a distortion of what is actually important to you and what you actually want to be like or doing or whatever. And it isn't until you get past that and you're able to look, in this analogy, into a real mirror, and you're able to start appreciating the things that are actually really valuable and important about yourself. And you can look back and go, oh, this is why I was feeling that. And I think that's why for anybody who's listening and couldn't actually see it, I was making like these pukey faces. It's because it does resonate for me. That idea that like we as humans want to be loved and want to be appreciated. And sometimes that can get distorted to the point where you're like, I kind of know why I feel this way, but I don't like that I feel this way. And then it isn't until after you get out of that situation that you can be like, oh, I understand why I was feeling that, why I wanted that even in those times. That doesn't mean that it's a positive thing. Like, you can still look back on it and go, oh God, I am sickened by this. And it's definitely one of those situations where the reason I feel sickened by the Darkling and how he interacts with Alina is because I've been on Alina's side of things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think like all of us probably, well, maybe not popular geekonomy so much, but all of us can kind of look back at a time. I mean, I know Jonathan and I have had this conversation more than once where we can look back at a time where we were like the geeky, like picked on kid, and like, you know, like I think it leads to a better understanding of these things.
Disclaimer, I was the geeky picked on kid, but I also was an idiot and didn't realize I was being picked on. I don't have as much trauma. It's because I didn't realize it until like 20 years.
Well, and and granted, like I know, like there's an age difference between all of us, really. But like Jonathan, again, like I mean, you and I have had these conversations so many times about being like, now we kind of feel like we're like this like royalty, you know what I mean? Like, we have so many friends and everybody likes us, and it's so much fun to be like in these like cliques in a way, but like I don't know, you know.
No, I can say that while I have seemed to be remarkably adjusted as the Regina George of all geeks, I too was definitely not popular or pretty when I was little. I was very awkward. I was very geeky. I was like,
lies. I've seen pictures of you.
How dare you? But no, I was very bad at being, you know, confident and being me. It was, you know, baby me would see me now and be so proud. I like to think I've made her happy, but like, you know, it's definitely like, it's a commonality that we all share, even though like geeky things are way more mainstream and popular now. And that was definitely happening while I was at the end of high school and entering college. But it still was like, for background, I come from a very conservative, all white, upper middle class Republican town. And I was going to be picked on regardless because I am brown and I don't have straight blonde hair. And I also brought smelly Indian food. Smelly. Ugh, smelly. That's smelly. It's delicious. But I brought, you know, smelly foreign food, and I, you know, liked nerdy things, and I was good at math, except I was also conveniently an idiot, and I didn't realize I was being bullied until I made friends, like, you know, middle of middle school, and they were like, hey, those people are being mean to you. And I'm like, are they? Really?
So I'm still not sure why I was always bullied, but, you know, starting in middle school, but I suspect it had to do with the fact I wore clogs to the beach, the school beach trip. My stepfather was from Sweden. Everyone wore clogs. For a beach, they were perfect. You could throw them on, you could throw them off. It didn't matter if they got wet. Yeah,
they were clogs.
That was weird. Guys wearing clogs was not a thing.
Clogs are the Swedish Crocs.
Oh no! Oh no! I hate it.
Well, okay. So moving on, because there's like a few other things I wanted to go into here, but we're kind of closing in on 9:30. I don't. So when Alina goes back into the fold for the first time, after she has obviously had her, or no, this is, when did this happen? Oh my God, this is pre. It was after her. I don't know. Whatever. It's after she's with Nikolai, et cetera, et cetera. And she says like it's as if the fold was reaching out to her and welcoming her. It made no sense. She knows that it's a dead and empty place, not a living thing. But it knows me. She thinks it knows me. Like calls to like, which is again like the Darkling. You know, that's his words in her head. And obviously that's, you know, some of that is because of the connection that she has with him and everything. But everything that happens in the fold, including, you know, the Darkling appearing to her the way he does for the first time, and her feelings when they bomb the nest of oh my god, I'm not going to be able to pronounce those. Nishkavoya. So it's something like that.
No, it's the blah 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 blah.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Nishkavoya, like his bad things.
It's the
so it's after she's the Volcra. It's after she's been bitten by his whatever the F they're called, and I don't know why I'm just not swearing. But
Dark creatures.
For
lack of a better term.
But also like I kind of feel like obviously her being bitten by his creatures is why she is feeling that connection, but I feel like there might be more to it than that. Like I don't know, I could be wrong here, but the idea of her feeling that connection, this is also the first time she has entered the fold since she discovered her powers. So she knows that she is, you know, she can prevent them coming close and everything, but that Alina being Alina that doesn't necessarily mean she wants to hurt them. I mean, and even if she had never been bitten, I don't know, like it almost makes me wonder.
Not really just on some level though, Tara. She came back into the fold with the Darkling, remember? At the end of
oh god, I forgot about that.
And so that's why I sort of thought it was a combination of the shackle, of the collar and the bite that sort of pulled her connection closer to the Darkling. So I think the collar did it on some level, but she probably wasn't fully aware of it in that moment, just because she was so consumed with like the fear of what's going to happen to her, of, you know, like imminent death at the hands of the Darkling, like how she was going to get them out of it. So I suspect that connection was also possibly there at that point, but the bite like truly made it like solidified. And I think, I don't know, I thought it was all just like a very natural way for her to think about it and feel about the Volcra after learning from Baghra that they used to be people.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, she presumably is the only person with that knowledge outside of Volcra, outside of Baghra, and outside of the Darkling himself. So I think the fact that she hears them as people's screams, like, isn't even, you know, might not even directly be related to that bite and that connection to the Darkling, but it might just be like a further manifestation of her empathy. And, you know, obviously, like, the bite may have had something to do with furthering that hallucination, but I think that it was, you know, brought on by the fact that she was in the fold and finally able to think about that space without the overarching fear of the Darkling, like, just over her immediately. And then, like, her knee-jerk reaction is, holy shit, these were people.
Yeah.
And it just sort of manifesting in a very, like, you know, physical way or a very what is the word? Auditory way. That's the one. Also a very eerie way, because it's eerie and it's in her ears.
Irritory.
Yeah, it's an irritory way.
So I had another quote I was going to use for this, but I actually, despite the fact that it's from this book, I think I want to save it for now that I'm looking at it again. I think I want to save it for post for Ruin and Rising, because I think that the idea of it fits better with that book. But it's about Mirtzos, and I think that's something we need to talk about after we've all finished the next book. So moving on, after Mal tells Alina that he told the royals, the higher ups that he was hunting with all about her, that she served in the First Army, she saved Nikolai's life, she hates herring, she loves plum cake, stuff about their childhood in the orphanage. She asked like why he would tell them that, and he says, I wanted to make you human. All they see when they look at you is the sun summoner. They see a threat, another powerful Grisha like the Darkling. I want them to see a daughter or a sister or a friend. I want them to see Alina. And I like, in a way, I like where he went with this, because it's like he's humanizing her as a leader, unlike Nikolai, who is trying to, he wants people to see her as the sun summoner, as a saint, maybe, and then also as his wife, and therefore eventually, hopefully, the queen in his eyes. I like where Mel's coming from to a point, but Nick had some thoughts on this that I also had kind of not. I just never put the notes in here, but go ahead, Nick, please.
So I agree with you. Like I think that there's an aspect of it that is really good and important, but it also there is language in there that is so much like what we say when we're trying to talk about why somebody who would otherwise not care about rape or abortion or other forms of abuse, trying to say, well, what if it was your wife? What if it was your daughter? What if it was your mother? What if it was your sister? What if it was these people that are directly connected to you? And needing some immediate direct sense of that in order to care about somebody else and their choices and what they need and want, versus being able to say like, oh, that's your choice, that's what you need or want, or that was your experience, I'm just going to trust you and believe in you. And there's something about that just has always struck me the wrong way, simply because we shouldn't need to play make-believe of, well, if this was my daughter, I could think of this differently. We should be able to think of it as, this is a human being who experiences things the ways that other human beings do, like I do, and I can value and appreciate that even if that's not my personal experience.
Yeah, I think that there's the thing is there's errors in the way like both Nikolai and Mal portray Alina. And that's the problem. Like, why is it these two dudes who are the ones who are directing how she is viewed by everybody else in this world, and previously the Darkling? It's never her. She never is actually up to this point, she has never been in control of how she is viewed by anybody. First, it was the Darkling portraying her as the sun summoner and like the opposite of him, and like, we together are going to save the fold. And then it was, oh shit, at some point it's the opera, like portraying her as a saint, like straight up just a saint, and possibly a martyred saint. And then it's Nikolai, like, this is the sun summoner and she is powerful and she could be the queen. And then it's Mal saying like, but also she's just a girl. Like, she has like almost no control over her own destiny.
I think I will say, like, the one place where I see her actually having control over how she presents herself is with the Grisha, when she, decides to make them all equal, and she decides, it's going to be this way. And I think that's the one place where she really has influence and where people really see her for her. And I think that's kind of the most inspiring place too, because what you see at the end of the book is that the Grisha really do follow her, and they really do believe in her, and they literally crawl into weird apparat moldy tunnels with her. And like they literally defend the discs that David built for her, like, you know. And I think it kind of shows in a very powerful way how important and terrifying she can really be, and like the loyalty that she can amass when she's allowed to speak for herself and when she's able to speak for herself. Because I think, you know, what she does with the Grisha and the alliances that she makes there, and what she does there, bringing them all together and forcing them to cooperate and forcing them to see each other on equal footing, like, obviously it was ham-fisted, but like, you know, she does it and it works, and they work together and they become friendly with each other. And you see that, you know, for lack of better words, I'm going to go back to, you know, Hogwarts houses, you see that inner house unity, you know? And it's like, it's kind of like the example of what Alina can truly do when she's allowed to be Alina and when she's allowed to present herself and make her own decisions. And like, that's really what she wants. And, you know, a part of that was her being petty and screaming at Zoya and being like, oh, like, screw you. I don't believe you. Like, why are you here? And like, as much as it's petty and ridiculous, I'm also like, yeah, like standing up for yourself. I was like, snaps for you, but also like, I am a Zoya.
Well, but also, why should she believe why Zoya is there? She had every right to question that.
I was like,
none for Zoya Wiener.
Like, you know, first off, call out that bitch who literally broke your ribs out of petty jealousy. Call out that bitch who like probably fucked your man at some point, and call out that bitch who like definitely was who was your sworn enemy's favorite and seems to just be hanging out here for no reason. Like, obviously I'm all about that. Low key though, another trope that I hate is the girls fighting with each other because of the boys, and all I want is for Alina and Zoya to be BFFs and decide, screw boys, we love each other. But we all know that's not going to happen. But a girl can dream. Can we please have a YA book starring a girl that does not involve her being nemesis with another girl because of boy? That's all I want. That's all I want. It's fine. But yeah, no, I love that she, you know, was kind of unapologetically savage about it, because Zoya literally broke her ribs. And like, I adore Zoya. She's my favorite. Y'all gonna see that next week. Like, I'm literally cosplaying her, but like, Alina was right to come at her that way, and she was right to be angry about it. And Mal being like, oh, she's just jealous. I'm like, Mal, sit down. Like, you don't know what's happening with this girl drama. Like, sit down, sweetie. Don't put your neck
There's so much more going on here than you, Mal.
I really like Mal being like, it's okay, she's jealous. And I'm like, Mal, sweetie, Mal, oh no. Don't put your neck in here. They're gonna both bite it off. Like, and not in a cute way.
I'm really, so, you know, I haven't read ahead. I'm 2 books in. I'm really loving the series. I would love to see a YA novel with a young woman lead that doesn't involve things like a love triangle, doesn't involve a somebody who's just going to like offer to sacrifice themselves for everybody else, where they actually own their identity and they're the ones driving how they are perceived, versus the sort of men around them doing that. You know, there are just so many echoes of some of these other YA novels. But I also want to stress, I really do appreciate some of the ways that Alina is different, and the ways that Alina really does take ownership, kind of like what you were saying, Nami, like with the Grisha, with, you know, it is refreshing to see those aspects.
Her punching Nikolai, her punching it.
Yes.
Chef's kiss. Perfection.
Love.
Yeah, I do hate how she moves from like one love triangle to another love triangle, but at least Nikolai is like worthy. I guess.
Low key, let's have the love triangle where Nikolai stops politicianing at Mal. And
is this a love like
them
quadrangle? Like is the dark?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a love square.
No, it's a love triangle. It's a love square with Alina, Mal, Zoya, and then also Zoya.
Oh yeah, because I forgot about the Mal offshoots.
Nikolai and Alina, and then Nikolai and Mal's previous bromance when they were pirates, and the Darkling's trying to be the fifth corner. And
I mean,
no, get out, old man.
I'll be completely honest. I might try to. I don't know if we'll get actually like any responses, but I might try to put this up on a poll, like as a poll on our Twitter. Like, I'm actually curious about how many women, like young women in high school, have been in love triangles, because I have more than once.
I was never in love triangles. I was just that person on the edge pining, and they were like, Nami, what are your emotions? And I'm like, I have none.
I was in at least 2, probably 3, if I really want to think about it. So.
Also, I was under strict no,
because there was always like me dating somebody, and then somebody else who was like on the side, like a dude friend who was like, yeah, but I like Tara too, which sounds really weird because yes, I was a total fucking nerd who got picked on all the time, but somehow dudes were just super into me.
It happens. No,
nice. But did you get picked? You didn't get picked on by boys, though.
Oh no, I totally got picked on by boys when I was in like middle school.
Oh, you did?
Like,
okay.
When I was in high school, like, and not right away in high school, but like sophomore year in high school, it suddenly went from like Tara's being picked on to I still have. I mean, honestly, I cut my hair. Bless you, Nami. I cut my hair short. Literally like the week before I started my senior year of high school, and I walked into school, and like some kids were like, "What are you, a lesbian?" And I was like, I mean, no, I'm not a lesbian, but would it matter if I was?
Like coming out as bisexual.
Well, because I did. It's like I didn't know what to say. It's like, no, I'm not a lesbian. Like clearly, like I've dated dudes. I am currently dating a dude, but like also like I don't want to lie. So like I literally just said, no, I'm not a lesbian, but I think I literally went like, but. Because they were like freshmen or sophomore dudes or something, and I was just like, but then that became like a thing. Like for like months, it was like Tara has short hair, so she's a lesbian. Because this was also in 1999, by the way. So like, God forbid a girl have short hair and wear flannel. I don't know. Also, bullshit. That's the 90s. Every fucking girl wore flannel in the goddamn 90s.
John and I are like,
you are trying to give boy children logic, which they just do not possess.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, boys picking on girls in middle school is pretty standard.
And
it wasn't. Trust me, it wasn't standard middle school picking on. But yeah, I don't want to get into.
Unfortunately.
I don't want to get into the dark things that happened.
Okay, you know what?
Also, any middle school boys who are listening, you should not pick on girls. That is not appropriate.
Don't bully people. That's not nice. What would your mom say? She would be disappointed, and so am I.
Also, it doesn't matter what your mom would say. You should inherently feel like that is not something you want to do.
Why did I...
It was a good
because
voice.
That's the automatic response that we are taught to give. What would so and like exactly?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, listen, I'm not about trying to teach morality to middle school boys. So, like, if it's what would your mom say, and that's what's going to scare you into not being a good person, like, fine, we'll take that step. Also,
totally understandable. Honestly,
I was thinking, to your list of things that I would like to see in a YA novel, consider, instead of a love triangle, a happy polycule. Consider, instead of a love triangle, an asexual main character. Consider, instead of a love triangle, an assassin character who just kills her love interest because, I don't know, plot?
Yeah.
Well, and
I
to
am
be
here
fair,
for all of that.
to be completely fair, I feel I don't want to throw Leigh Bardugo under the bus here because these novels were published a while back. And I'm sorry, but not sorry. I am one of those people who believes that certain, not all, take care on, certain, not all authors, writers, whatever, can they can grow and they can change and they can do better. And I do believe that Leigh Bardugo is one of those authors who's already been doing that.
Oh, absolutely.
And I mean, to be honest, I think, honestly, we see Nadia and Tamar are already clearly into each other in this book. So like it's like you already see that there is a what I'm guessing is a lesbian relationship. I mean, it's not stated explicitly that either one of them is a lesbian, but I feel like that's probably what it is. But regardless of what it is clearly a relationship between two women that is not questioned by anybody around them at all. Yeah. And I really feel like I think that Leigh Bardugo showed signs of being somebody who there are good things in these books and a lot of good things in these books and in her future novels it just expands and grows. And I think the show is also going to show some of that as well. And I think that that's very, very important because honestly, I today am not the same person I was even I'm 8 years ago. I won't even say, I could say, I think 7 years ago is when I really started just becoming, I don't know. And I was in my fucking 30s. Yeah. You know, like people grow, they change, and they need to be given that room to grow and change because education and experience and just the world and life as a whole you should be allowed that. You should.
And I think
you absolutely should.
It's really important to think about. Oh, sorry.
We all have strong feelings about this. John, you go ahead.
Well, and I was going to say novels and stories that have been written at certain times. And my favorite science fiction novel ever is The Forever War. And I just actually was reading an article by the author, or an interview of the author, who completely acknowledges, and I will agree with him, that his view of homosexuality in the 70s when he wrote the novel has clearly evolved, and it just doesn't... It's not a good look, as he will even admit.
But the fact that he recognizes that is amazing.
Hashtag growth. We love growth in this house. And yeah, I want to say another thing that's really obvious to me. This book came out this series started coming out 8 years ago. There are things in YA that sells, and a part of that, is love triangles. It's tropes, and writing for those tropes as an author, it's a reasonable thing to do. Obviously, it's well and good to sit here and be like, oh, I want to see more of this, I want to see more of that, et cetera, et cetera. But, unless I'm going to sit down and write it myself and take the steps to ensure it gets published and, do the marketing to ensure it gets popular to, make these things happen more, things are what they are because certain things are popular. And you can't get mad at an author for, sticking with those popular things. And I would never do that, especially because I have mentioned, in our talks about the first book and the reason I got into this series, a part of the reason I got into this series is because Six of Crows is so diverse. So, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, but Six of Crows, it has, 6 main characters. And in my mind, it has 5 because one of them is a garbage person and can be discarded. But it includes a crippled man. It includes a brown girl who has been the victim of human trafficking. It includes a plus-sized woman who is, fleeing witch hunters, essentially. It includes a gay man who also is dyslexic. and it includes a Black bisexual man who is also has ADHD or some sort of like, you know, like high stimulation thing. It also includes, you know, that literal garbage person. But another thing that is
oh my god, now I'm like, who's the garbage person? Don't tell me.
Well,
Don't tell
you
me.
know the other ones, so you should be able to do it by process of elimination.
No, I haven't read it in so long. Like I just picked up Six of Crows. I have not, like, I literally read this like 3 years ago. I don't have my memory. It's not that good.
But one thing I will say is that it doesn't include like it includes romances that are like, you know, not centered around love triangles. It includes, you know, a lot of things and a lot of diversity that you don't see in the first few books. And like one thing I will say, like, you know, one thing that really struck me in this book is the explicit lack of diversity. Almost the only group that is like explicitly ever described as diverse is the people of Shuhan, and that is through the twins, because the twins are specifically described as having slanted eyes. And those are the only people, and like obviously we know that Shuhan is based off of, you know, East Asian people, prominently China, but all East Asian people. And, you know, the Furgens are obvious. Fjordans.
Like a fjord.
People say European.
You can do it now.
I will never be able to say this word. But people say the Ford people are... The Ford people are clearly described as blonde and brawny men, and it's obvious that those are like Northern European. But with the exception of those two descriptions, like even though they describe Paja like the material key, the second material key that ends up on Alina's council, even though they describe Paja as being Suli and saying, oh, she has dark hair and dark eyes, they never actually say like she has brown skin and like she's coded as like a Southeast Asian person, you know, and like that's not there. And all of this detail, you know, like, and you know, they're literally in Novi Zem for like the first couple chapters, and they never describe that Novi Zem is a country of Black people. Like literally never said nothing about the descriptions of the people. Like they don't even say, oh, that woman with coily hair. Like literally nothing is coded to be racially not white, with the exception of the twins. And so I think the fact that Leigh later goes on to write books with these obviously not white characters and makes it a point to make these characters not white, and kind of, you know, retcons her world to be a world of color is really amazing. And it's a way that we see her growth. Another thing I will say is that, so I doubt if Nick and John saw this, because this was in one of the earlier prints of the book. So Tara, you might have seen this, but you also probably might not have registered this as your original read was so long ago. But in the original like writing of this book, at one point when Nikolai is discussing his knowledge of how he learned like gun work from some man from Novi Zem, he's like, yeah, those crazy barbarians, they do this. And she took out that wording because once she coded Novi Zem as Black, calling them barbarians was like real not good. So, you know, what you were explaining, line was removed. And I only actually found out about that line because of, you know, the Grishaverse Big Bang that I was in. There is a person in there who is, you know, a Black woman, and she is really vocal about, you know, talking about, you know, problems with race and representation in media that she loves, because, you know, it's obvious to say that you can love a thing and still criticize it, which is, you know, big deal to me because I love this, I criticize this, and I love Leigh for her growth. And, you know, that's always going to be a constant for me. But, you know, this woman, she was the one who pointed this out to me originally, and she was like, yeah, like this is why I don't like Nikolai, because he has that line. And I only realized this line was taken out in reprints. I was like, I don't remember that. Like, I feel like I would have remembered because, you know, I read this book after reading Six of Crows. So, you know, at this point, Novi Zem was already Black coded to me. And I would have been like, barbarians at the Black people? Like, what? You know, and I remember not seeing that. And I was like, that's interesting. So seeing how Leigh did this work to take out damaging things that she had written, like, I really respect that, you know? And I know some shitty fans like to be like, oh, it's pandering. Like, bullshit. It's not you can grow as a person
Yes.
and change your mind on what is appropriate to include and what is appropriate to not do. Leigh has made amazing decisions to make this universe more inclusive and more visible and more friendly to people of color, to disabled people, to
and also without retconning things, which is really important.
Yeah. And like, you know, I think it's so important that she has done that. And like, you know, she's gone through to like explicitly make characters with ambiguous descriptions POC. She has, you know, TV canon made Alina Shu, and I think that's awesome. She's TV canon made Mal some sort of mixed Suli Shu, whatever. I don't. What is Archie Renault's like background? I don't know. He is pretty. He is adorable. He just squish his little cheeks. And also his baby cheeks because he has a child already. Like, what child has child? Unclear. But, yeah, you know, like, I love all the stuff that Leigh has done. And, like, goddamn, are we here for growth? I'm here for growth. I love Leigh Bardugo.
Yeah, no, I really think it's super, super fucking important to note that she has grown as an author and not retcon things.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't like Dumbledore's gay all of a sudden. This is
yeah, and like she's like,
and then you have the chance to make Dumbledore actually gay, and you don't.
Yeah, I know, right? Like she full on has also listens to fandom. Like people have told her that like people have been, you know, racist to people like in the fandom, and she's been like, hey, like we're not a group that tolerates that. That's not okay. And I'm like,
that's awesome.
Like obviously it's like, you know, everybody decent should do that, but the fact that she cares about her fans and especially her marginalized fans to like really stand up for people, it's part of the reason that like, you know, jumping back into online fandom was exhausting, and jumping back into an online fandom made up of so many children is exhausting as well. But I'm like, God damn, I'm here to stay. This is my new home because Leigh Bardugo is wonderful.
And I just want to say, like, almost all media is going to be critiqued, right? Like no media out there, with maybe maybe a few exceptions. I'll just say, I'll leave it ambiguous. Like maybe there's a few exceptions where there are creators and media where it's flawless. But like most media, you're going to critique it, and that's okay. Because if you can't critique your media and you can't look at it and say, these are my issues with it, and still appreciate it, then it would be so hard to appreciate any media, right? And it's something that I think both Tara and Nami talked about that I think is so important as Sebastian comes and hangs out with me. He's going to lay down a second. Yes, my baby.
Okay, I'm done.
For anybody who's listening and not watching, my dog Sebastian came and like hung out with me for a second. Anyway, it's so important that we can grow as people, right? And we can realize we've made mistakes and say, you know what, that was really messed up, and I'm going to do better from now on. And I firmly believe that there are multiple parts to an apology, any apology. And the first step is saying you're sorry. And the second step is basically saying, this is what I'm going to do better. Third step is actually doing better and owning that entire process, right? Like that's a true apology. And if J.K. Rowling came out tomorrow and said, you know what, I've really been thinking about this. I really fucked up. And I was completely wrong. I had these perceptions because of things that, you know, my own experiences, but A, I'm wrong. B, I own that I'm wrong. C, here's what I'm going to do to try to work and be better at this. And then following through and doing that, like, I might be able to forgive her. Right now, I'm basically like, I'm done with you. And I don't know, like, that's hard because Harry Potter was such an important part for me. Leigh Bardugo, on the other hand, like, she is doing better. Like, she literally, as Nami talked about, as Tara talked about, like, she's out there doing the work. She's also making sure that in her fandom, it's clear we aren't tolerating this kind of behavior. This is not who we are as a fandom. Like, those are the reasons why I love Leigh Bardugo. I love that we can sit here and we can spend an hour and a half every few weeks and talk about her books, and we can talk about some of the problematic aspects of it. But at the end of the day, like, we're doing that because we love her books. And that's what it boils down to. Like, we wouldn't be spending this time on the books or on her if we didn't love them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, that's such a big point. You know, honestly, like, for those of you who don't know, I've just started a new job and I am literally constantly drained. But like, literally the chance to come here and like hang out with my 3 friends and talk to them about a book series that I really care about, written by an author who really cares about her books and about her fandom and about every single person in that fandom, like, it means so much. And it's so refreshing in, you know, because I know so many people are specifically experiencing that J.K. Rowling heartbreak, you know, because
Yep.
I grew up with Harry Potter. It literally means the world to me. And I know so many people my age who grew up with Harry Potter and are trans or non-binary, and they just feel that love has been ripped away from them because of what shit Rowling has done. Like,
Yep.
it's so important to know that she is not the rule, that she really is the exception, and that there are authors who really care about their fans and care about all their fans and care about doing right by them. And it makes me so happy. And it also, you know, makes me very happy that Leigh wrote The Darkling, because, you know, now I have a place to put J.K. Rowling, which is next to The Darkling in the garbage can where she belongs until she takes back her turf ways, which honestly I doubt. I'm not holding my breath for. And, you know, even if she comes back one day and she's like, hey, I was wrong, you know, back to Nick's points about Genya, like, you don't have to forgive people. And like, the harm she's done it's not fixable for a lot of people, because a lot of people are hurting. And, you know, if you're one of those people that are hurting because of what that bitch did, might I give you the Grishaverse? Might I give you this little piece of a comfort cake? And
or I will speak up and say Red Rising.
Ooh,
there are actual like amazing trans characters in Red Rising.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, from now on, instead of, you know, telling people what our Hogwarts houses are, we can pick our Grisha order and our Red Rising color. I, for one, am definitely a material key, specifically a fabricator, because, you know, this bitch is about fabric. As far as Red Rising colors, I am genuinely not sure. Like, my knee-jerk reaction is I want to say pink because I love the color pink, but pink is also like low-key the prostitute, so I don't want to be pink. You know, I don't want to be pink.
But also, like, sex work is work, so...
Yeah, no, sex work is work. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I mean, knowing Nami, I will say no, not a pink.
Yeah, no,
like,
sex work is work.
Yeah, not trying to say...
But this is more like, they're forced into sex work because that is how they are born. And that's less good. Sex work
it's not
sex work is work.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. I mean, we'll get into Red Rising eventually too, for sure. But okay, so we're closing in on 2 hours now. So let's wrap this up. Jonathan, because you had to bow out for a minute because you were having issues. Any last thoughts?
No, I'm just enjoying the series, and I didn't love that it ended basically on a cliffhanger. I am against that in my novels.
But it's the second book in a 3-part
come on.
Yeah, but you can.
That's how the middle book works.
I understand that, but I have a personal preference that, yes, you have a series, but that each novel can stand on its own and doesn't force you to read the next one if you don't so desire. It's just a preference of mine. Not that my favorite series, Ice and Fire, Song of Ice and Fire, did that particularly well, but as far as leaving on cliffhangers, but
Well, I mean, the good thing
in
is
general, that's what I prefer.
You read these when they were all published, so at least you could just jump to the next one, right?
Yeah.
I don't mind cliffhangers if I can binge read or binge watch. You know, I never truly understood the Empire Strikes Back struggle, you know, of like actually watching it and having to wait for Revenge of the Sith coming out. What was that like, John? Can you provide insight?
Not Revenge of the Sith, Nami.
Oh my God! Return of the Jedi, God.
So I can honestly.
That was some sort of like a.
The shade.
So with the Empire Strikes Back was an interesting thing because we went as our science fiction club in school went together, and we actually got out of school to go see it. The head of our science fiction club was the superintendent of schools, and he took us on a field trip to see it.
Nice.
But
amazing.
We were cursing horribly at the end of that movie. We're like, what? How? Yeah, it was not good. It was the bus ride back was pretty interesting.
Also, I can't believe I just like revoked all of my geek credentials in one fell swoop.
We knew what you were saying. It was like a Freudian slip, though.
It was such a Freudian flip too, because you know, Revenge of the Sith is the movie that I waited for. Because like,
yeah.
I was like,
it was Return of the Jedi, is what you really wanted.
Return of the Jedi. Oh well, it's.
Listen, Nami, just to bring it all home, as I said at the beginning of this episode, we love your mouth noises.
Oh, thank you. I love them.
All right. Well, any last thoughts before I close this out, guys? We good?
No.
All right. So we will be back in 1 week. Shockingly.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I know. You got 1 week. You got 1 week to read Ruin and Rising. You can do it, Nick. You can do it.
I can do it. I believe in myself.
I believe in you. So we'll be back in 1 week to talk about Ruin and Rising, and then after that we'll have a break. But also, you should probably start reading Six of Crows or listening to it again immediately after that.
Luckily, I have already read Six of Crows.
Yes, you have. So maybe you should
good
just
on that end.
Oh, so you are ahead. You did read ahead.
Well, sort of. I didn't read it. Six of Crows was the first book that I read.
But he hasn't
I haven't read anything in the Grisha original trilogy, so now I'm going back and reading the Grisha trilogy, and they're connected, but they're not like, you're not going from the third book into Six of Crows. Like, that's not how the continuity works.
Basically,
and thankfully we're not doing Cricket Kingdom till the first couple weeks of January. So you
see, I'm good.
Basically, John, for reference, there's about a 2-year gap between them, and one of the main characters in Six of Crows is all about the saints, and she loves Saint Alina.
Got it.
Beautiful.
But yeah, so yeah, we'll be back next week for Ruin and Rising, and then we might have one more like episode before, or we'll have Six of Crows, parts 1 and 2 before the end of this year. So actually, you only really have to do part 1 2 weeks after that. But you know, all right. So thank you, anybody who watches this post and listens to it as a podcast. This has been a really long episode, but we did cover an entire book. So thank you guys, and y'all have a lovely night.
Night.
Night, everybody.
Bye.